why you're studying neuroscience. There's a study that has been done that posits there may be a belief gene. There may be a gene in people that makes them believers, and those of us who don't have it, we don't have it.
Right, right. Well, I think you might be referring to Dean Hamer's much publicized notion of the God gene, which,
Yes.
if I'm not mistaken, related to a serotonin receptor or transporter that people have in abundance if they have these, tend to have these transcendent experiences. So it didn't deal with belief per se. I think that the issue of belief is that I don't see religious belief as distinct from any other kinds of beliefs. I mean, we represent the world in our thoughts, and all of us are in the business of hoping that our representations are accurate, or at least accurate enough so that we can successfully negotiate our lives happily. I mean, nobody wants to be mistaken, profoundly mistaken about their place in the world, or about what happens after death, or where their loved ones go after. I mean, we're not in the business of deceiving ourselves just willfully. And so religious beliefs are on all fours with all of our other beliefs. We are describing the world. We're trading in these descriptions through language. Someone says to you, well, do you realize that Jesus is your personal Savior, and nobody, He's the way and the truth and the life, and nobody gets to heaven but through Him? That is a description of the way this universe is organized in moral terms and in spiritual terms, and it's either right or wrong, and it purports to be right, and it promises terrible consequences to those who don't accept it. Now, this is a very strange scheme, I think, to believe in. I mean, I'm not the first person to point out that it's a very strange sort of loving God who would have salvation depend on a person's ability to believe in Him for bad reasons. I mean, it's a weird scenario, but it's a scenario that is many people find emotionally consoling. And this another aspect here is that reason and belief are not easily separated from emotion. I mean, our rational lives are deeply entangled with our emotional lives, and we feel emotional responses to things we find to be unreasonable. I mean, I happen to think that doubt is on a continuum with disgust and other psychological rejection states. And so when we doubt a proposition, we are having an emotional response to it. And so I think we just have to be. I think there's an all-purpose corrective here, which is just intellectual honesty. I mean, if you cease to pretend to be certain about things you're not certain about, see where that gets you. See where that gets you in conversation with other human beings. I think it'll get you a profoundly ethical life. It'll certainly get you a profoundly non-deceptive life.
Which leads me to one other quick follow-up question. Yeah. When you say being intellectually honest and admitting you don't know these things, you said there were 3 ways to look at religion. 1, that it's true. 2nd, that it's useful. Yeah. And 3rd, that you're an atheist and that is a religion. But there's a 4th thing, and that could be that you're an agnostic. You don't know whether it's true or not.
Yeah, but I don't meet too many agnostics about Zeus. All these agnostics about the God of Abraham should also be agnostic about Zeus. I mean, that's the same scenario. Thank you.
Hi, Angela Caldwell. The physics professor, Mr. Krauss, just spoke to the Bezos scholars. Mm-hmm. One of the things he said, well, actually, before I say that, I'd like to say about your comment on the biblical creation of women, that's only because creators have to make a rough draft before they get it right.
I stand corrected.
But Mr. Krauss was saying in discussion of Galileo's theory of relativity and Einstein's discovery of the electromagnetism such and such, was that they're both right, but they're not necessarily consistent. And I was wondering what your opinion on that sort of view is for evolution versus creationism.
Well, this gets us, I think, somewhat too far afield into questions of epistemology and the philosophy of science. There are real problems in trying to make the claim that our beliefs about the world represent reality as it is. That our beliefs can never be perfectly true. And there's much evidence in science that we get these approximations, which are incredibly useful as guides to reality, and then they become overturned by other approximations that actually don't look much like the approximations they're overturning. So, relativity Einsteinian relativity did not look much like Newton's physics. And yet they both work within certain limits. So the question is, what is the relationship between reality and our thoughts? All of this gets very interesting and nuanced and is perfectly legitimate to debate at the fringe of science and theoretical physics, certainly. But it doesn't. It really doesn't apply to our commonsensical human experience in the same way. I mean, it's clear you can be right or wrong about a variety of propositions by which you would want to live your life. And you can believe things for good or bad reasons. You can have justified or unjustified beliefs. And we all recognize a degree of intellectual honesty and rigor here. I mean, if somebody tells you that your boyfriend is cheating on you, you're going to want evidence. And you're going to be convinced to the degree that they provide evidence. Now, if they provide, if they dump out all the pictures on the tabletop and say, here he is, caught in the act, then that's one experience. If they just say, well, I saw it in a dream, you're not going to be so interested. And there's a continuum there. And there are these probabilistic ascriptions of certainty. We're very rarely totally certain about anything, and yet we have degrees of confidence that we can all talk intelligently about. And anyone who's certain that the Bible was dictated by the creator of the universe, or is certain that Jesus was born of a virgin, or certain that you get 72 virgins in paradise if you die in defense of Islam, these are virtually baseless certainties. And we can know that if we just speak honestly about these ideas. Yeah.
Hi, Mr. Harris.
Yeah, and I don't know, I'm not keeping time very well here, so if someone's going to get a hook, okay, you're...
I'm Ben Alterman, a Bezo scholar. You said that in religion, woman was created from man's rib, especially in the Old Testament. In Genesis, there are two stories of creation. There's also a story that goes, God created man, male and female, he created them.
That's true.
In Judaism, the interpretation is such that man and woman, the conventional one is such that man and woman were created back to back as one single unit, and then God cleaved them in half. And from that interpretation, there comes a lot of discussion about how man and woman interplay off of each other and grow together, and that they take different areas because of the type of person that man and woman is. What is your response to the evolution of religions such that just the way science has evolved over time, and that it starts to include more as it learns more and understands more about people?
Right, right.
And well, the text is just a basis for something that's evolved over time.
Yeah. Well, I think we should be... The first thing I would say is that by my lights, they are not and cannot and will not evolve quickly enough. I mean, this is the... we just don't have that much time to wait around for people to dicker with their religious certainties. At least that's my view. But the other thing is that we have to be honest about why they are evolving. The door leading out of religious literalism doesn't open from the inside. I mean, these religions have been moderated because of the pressure of modernity. I mean, it's secular politics and a conception of human rights and our growing scientific understanding of the universe has applied pressure, much more so in the case of Judaism and Christianity than it has in Islam, because Islam has been isolated from the Enlightenment and even the Renaissance in some significant sense. And so this comes from outside. So this is not to be credited to faith. This is the legacy of faith continually losing the argument to science and secular politics and common sense. This is why we are not stoning people to death for adultery in Aspen. It's a good thing we're not, but yeah. Just wait. It's possible. But so are you going to credit the Catholic Church that did not absolve Galileo of heresy until 1992? I mean, this organization is very slow to move, and I think at some point it would take something like their prescription against contraception use. I mean, this is flagrantly immoral, getting people killed throughout the developing world. I mean, ministers go into villages riddled with AIDS and preach the sinfulness of condom use. Okay, shockingly immoral behavior mandated by their religious faith. I certainly hope to live to see the day where the Vatican recants this dogma and they say, this was a mistake. condoms are blameless. That'll be a good thing. Who's going to get the credit? The Vatican when that happens? This is a dinosaur of an organization that has really been slow to make the simplest accommodations to basic human sanity. So that's the other point I would make, is that we have to be honest about where the change is coming from. And the other, now that I'm on the subject, the other point I would make is that our attachment to these traditions essentially sends the message that it's impossible to speak about spirituality and ethics in a truly new, fresh, modern, rational, non-dogmatic, non-divisive way. That we have to stay linked to these traditions. I don't see any evidence for that, and we don't play by those rules in any other domain, certainly not in science.
But then how would you respond to the Saigong and Rabbi Kula sitting down last night at an evening exchange and talking openly about religions and comparing the ways they both work?
Well, that is the discourse of religious moderation. It's true that you can put moderate Christians and moderate Muslims and moderate Jews on the same dais, and they may, I think we should look closely at who's calling themselves a moderate and what they really believe. I think there are many people who pretend to more moderation than they do in fact embody. I think there are people who are sitting on the same dais in a very friendly way, in a collegial way, talking about the common project of religious diversity, all the while thinking that their colleagues are going to go to hell for eternity. I think people are finding themselves in that situation a lot and not admitting it. But as I sat down with Rick Warren, who is criticized from the religious right. I mean, I wouldn't call him a moderate. He's still a fundamentalist of sorts. But there are people much more fundamental than he who criticize him for not being biblical enough. John Meacham asked him in the interview, "Do you think Sam is going to go to hell?" Well, yeah, probably. So and yet we had a perfectly congenial conversation, and it was, we could collaborate on a common project to help people. There's no barrier to that, but this is to be ascribed to basic human decency and a larger purview of ethics and intuitions about how we want to collaborate with one another.
Thank you.
Yeah. One more question.
I'm Becca Bass, and I'm also a Bezos scholar.
Uh-huh.
And I'm not a religious person, and I don't know what I believe yet, but I was wondering if you had ever struggled with finding a balance between the logic, intellectualism, and what I think is kind of an innate human need for something more, something less rational.
Yeah, well, I think, I don't think I am a particularly good advertisement for achieving that balance, but within the privacy of my own mind, I do, work to find that balance. So I've spent months on meditation retreats, just doing nothing but practice meditation in silence. And this is not a matter of thinking, or you inadvertently think, but the goal of meditation is not to think about anything rationally or figure anything out. It is simply to pay more and more attention to the flow of your experience and see what it's like to be just aware of sights and sounds and sensations. This is a highly non-rational pursuit. It's not an irrational pursuit. I mean, it only becomes irrational if you begin making claims about the universe that are not rationally justifiable. But it is, it's an occasion in which, you experience bliss and a variety of things that spiritual people desperately want to experience. You don't have to pretend to know anything you don't know in order to do that, and that's really my basic point. Thank you very much. Thank you.